Hey guys, so I wanted to take some time to talk about the DMCA and what's going on Twitch recently. I put down a whole bunch of notes, but that's about it. I'm just going to try and get this out as quickly as I can without going too far into the weeds. So first thing I want to say is I am not a lawyer. I have worked with legal teams on matters that are similar to this in the past, and directly related to this, in fact, in the past. But I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs of every single aspect of the law. There's probably some things that I'm going to say that are maybe even completely inaccurate. I will try to post updates, maybe in annotations or something, if I do need to make corrections later. Just understand this is not coming from the stance of someone who is very experienced directly in the law, more just from the understanding of someone who has had a lot of experience being tangentially related to this stuff as it's gone on in the past. Second thing I want to say is just a quick disclaimer. I'm speaking on behalf of myself here. I'm not speaking on behalf of Blizzard Entertainment or Activision Blizzard. These are all just my own thoughts and opinions. Okay. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act. I think the first and most important thing to understand about this thing is that it's old. This was designed and put into law in 1998, okay? When this was created, the biggest problem everybody was worried about, and you can see this if you look through the actual law of the actual letter of the law, the biggest thing that everybody was concerned about when they made this was software piracy. Most of the language in this law directly relates to what happens if someone takes your software and puts it somewhere else on the internet for other people to get to. It has nothing to do directly in the law, has nothing to do with things like I'm a Twitch streamer and I'm broadcasting and I've got AC/DC playing in the background. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. The issue is that it created language and it created processes that can then be applied to pretty much any copyright, pretty much anything that can go on the internet. If it's possible to put it into digital form and it's possible to have a copyright for it, then it is covered by the processes that were put into place by the DMCA. When they made this thing, they weren't thinking about Twitch. They weren't thinking about YouTube. And the idea that somebody in the future could be making money and have their entire livelihood based on what they were concerned about and have it ripped away based on the actions that were put in place by the DMCA was not something that even entered the heads of the people who made this. Because again, it was 1998. It was Bill Clinton that signed this thing into being. Okay. Like this is a long enough time ago that nobody was even thinking about that stuff at the time. So I'll give a quick TLDR on how the DMCA actually works. So this is the process that people go through. A copyrights holder will issue what's known as a takedown notice to what's called a service provider. And a service provider, historically, into the letter of the law that was actually put into place in 1998, they use that language to govern things like ISPs, so Comcast, Cox, so on and so forth. But the way they wrote that language does mean that it also applies in modern times to things like YouTube and Twitch. They then, once the service provider receives that takedown notice, they have a requirement to take it down, to remove that content from their website, to achieve what's called safe harbor status. And I'll talk more about what that means in just a moment. Now, once it's been taken down, there is theoretically this idea of counter notice. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute too. But the intended way that the DMCA process works, again, as it was put together in 1998, was copyright holder makes a claim, service provider takes it down. The user who uploaded that content originally then can say, wait, no, this is actually fine. And there was meant to be this sort of back and forth. That was the balance that was supposed to be implied there. There's actually were checks and balances that were put into place by the DMCA. It's just unfortunate they're not really a thing nowadays. So I mentioned safe harbor status, and I want to talk about what that means a little bit, because that's super important for how the DMCA works and how a lot of what Twitch is doing relates to it. The idea is that they have created, through the DMCA, they have created what's called, again, safe harbor status. And that means that it's setting a service provider in a way that they are not legally liable for content that their users are uploading. As long as they adhere to a certain list of requirements, then they are considered a safe harbor. And thus, if a user does upload something that's infringing to their platform, then the service provider is not liable for that. That's saying, okay, actually, it's the user that did this. The user is the one that infringed your copyright. We're just here to provide a service, and our service was not providing your thing specifically. Our service was to allow people to upload things. So that's what that safe harbor means. And importantly for Twitch, the parts of that really come into play here is that when, in order to keep that safe harbor status, when they receive a takedown notice, they must, I repeat, must immediately or within a reasonable time frame, whatever you call a reasonable time frame, which is a little bit open to interpretation with the way that the law is written. This is part of the problem with this law. They must take down that content. Secondly, they must have what's called an adequate and responsibly implemented, I'm going to get into the actual language of it in a minute, method for taking action against repeat offenders. So if a user is constantly uploading stuff and being instituted takedown notices, again, I say uploading because that was the language when this law was originally written. If a user is constantly uploading stuff, getting it taken down, constantly uploading, getting it taken down, constantly, they don't require the copyright holder to just watch this guy 24/7 and make sure that he's not constantly re-uploading this stuff. They make it so that, okay, if it's been a repeat occurrence from the same individual, then there is a requirement that that account be terminated and they be suspended and removed from the platform. The problem is that the way that all of this has been set up creates a quote unquote guilty until proven innocent system. It basically means that if you are a streamer and a content or a copyright holder looks at your stream, says, hey, I know what that is. That's mine. You can't use that. And issues this takedown notice, then your stream is removed. You are banned for 24 hours and you are at risk of a permaban if this continues. It's essentially the copyright owner is allowed to say, they're using my thing, take it down right now. And Twitch has to comply. They legally have to comply with it at that point, or else they risk being liable for any copyright infringement themselves. They risk being held culpable to encouraging you and assisting you, that's the word I'm looking for, with continuing that copyright infringement. That's why that works that way. And that's why it creates this guilty until proven innocent system, which is, I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. The other problem that it has is that the counter notice isn't really a thing. Like, yeah, it's very, very, very easy for a copyright holder to, there's basically a form that you go and you fill out. I've used it. There's basically a form that you go and you fill out that says, hey, this part of your website, like this VOD or this live stream or whatever, is infringing on my copyright. This is the name of the copyright. I hereby state that under penalty of perjury that everything I believe here is to be accurate. This is my contact information. That's it. That's the form. And any copyright holder can take, seriously, it takes 20 seconds. It takes longer to log into the actual system to send this takedown notice than it does to actually issue the takedown notice itself. And the reason for that, there's a lot of reasons why Twitch makes that so easy. I may get into that in a minute. I may not. I'm trying not to make this video too long. But the reality is that then once you as the streamer have received this notice, or Twitch has received this notice and taken down your stream, then your counter notice options are very, like, what do you even do in that state? And the reality is you can actually get yourself into some serious legal trouble if you're not careful with these counter notices. I know a lot of people that have wanted to try and issue a counter notice and say, well, no, it was under fair use. It probably wasn't under fair use. The reality is copyright law is a landmine. And that what that means at the end of the day is if your stream was taken down and you want to issue a counter notice, you need to get a lawyer involved. You need to actually look into getting a legal representative because you might have to take this to court. And that's the other problem with this thing is that the copyright holder just basically clicks a form and says, yeah, whatever, it's done. The person who has been, again, the notice is issued to Twitch, but then they take down the user. So the user who the streamer in this case has all of this legal landmine that they have to go through to try and get back to where they were before. It's a mess. And what makes this even worse on top of all of this is the way that copyright law itself works. I mean, we talk about a law, the DMCA was issued in like 1998, right? Copyright law itself is something that it's been around since the printing press, I'm pretty sure. Like ever since that was invented back in, I don't know, 12 BC or something. That's how long copyright law has been around. And there's so many issues that have arisen with how copyright law works over the years. Many of which has to do with case law, and it has to do with the fact that once a court has ruled in a specific way on a specific topic, then it is very difficult for any future rulings to be treated differently. So if a court rules something in a way that is favorable for, in this case, copyright holders, then from then on, it's favorable for copyright holders, and vice versa. If something is unfavorable for copyright holders, then from then on, it will be unfavorable for them in the future. And so what this has created is essentially a requirement for copyright holders to enforce their copyrights. You don't actually lose your copyright. A lot of people say this. You don't actually lose your copyright if you don't enforce it. People tend to interpret it that way. That's not actually what happens. What does actually happen, however, is you may lose the ability to enforce that copyright in a court of law in the future. Here's what I mean. Say that there is a random Twitch affiliate who is streaming on Twitch and they like to have AC/DC Wednesdays, right? And so on Wednesday, they'll just play some AC/DC for a while. They'll jam out to it with their audience, and it's great, and everybody loves it. And it's hard to claim that any real damage is being done here to the copyright holder because there's like 20 viewers at tops, and like it's not a big deal. It's just something that this particular creator is liking to do. It's hard to prove that there's any particular damage being dealt there, but it is a copyright infringement in this case. Now, where it becomes a problem is if the RIAA or whatever record label AC/DC is under, or so on and so forth, whoever owns that copyright looks at this and says, whatever, it's not a big deal. We're not going to worry about it. And then later somebody else does that. Maybe then, I don't know, Asmongold decides to start having AC/DC Wednesdays, and now he's streaming AC/DC's music to 200,000 people every Wednesday. The copyright holder will have a hard time actually enforcing that copyright in a court of law if Asmongold's lawyers can go and say, well, this random Twitch affiliate was doing this for a year and a half, and you didn't have a problem with that. Why is it only a problem when my client does it? That's where things get really, really murky. And it's hard to actually say what direction that particular court ruling would go. I know I can't say that. Again, I'm not a lawyer. All I know is the gist of what's going on here. But that's a large part of why even the random, like, low-level people on Twitch are at risk of being hit by stuff like this, because there is actually that possibility that the copyright holder, as soon as they become aware of it, if it can be proven that they were aware of an infringement and did not take action, then they can have a hard time actually taking action in the future. So let's talk about what can be done here in this situation, because it's a mess. I think everyone involved kind of agrees it's a mess. Maybe not copyright holders. There are some copyright holders who probably enjoy the fact that they can just take anybody down off of Twitch if they really want to, but that's a mess. What can be done here? Well, I'll start by talking about a little bit of what I think Twitch could do to make this a little bit easier. First of all, they have this 3-strike rule currently, where after you have had your third DMCA takedown notice issued to your account, you're just instantly automatically permabanned from Twitch. You lose your account, you lose your channel, that's it, and you're done. I think that can actually take a look, because the letter of the law does not actually require a 3-strike rule. It doesn't actually require, it doesn't even name any particular specifics of what has to be done. In fact, I actually have it here, and if you're curious, this is Title 17, Section 512 I1A. Laws are complicated. And this specifically says, under Section 1, it's I1, Jesus. The limitations on liability established by the section shall apply to a service provider only if the service provider, and then it gets into what list of restrictions. Restriction A is that they have adopted and reasonably implemented and informed subscribers and account holders a policy that provides for the termination in appropriate circumstances of subscribers and account holders of the system of network who are repeat infringers. I'm going to try and put that in layman term a little bit more. This basically means there is a requirement that says that they have adopted and reasonably implemented, okay, a policy that means that they can close down accounts in appropriate circumstances of repeat infringers. It doesn't say anything about 3 strikes. It doesn't say anything about instant permaban, and it doesn't say anything really at all about what those appropriate circumstances or reasonably implemented are. Now, that is super risky because it is still the law and it's left open to interpretation. So Twitch does have to be very careful with this. Don't get me wrong. They have probably gone with the 3 strikes rule because that was deemed safe. And it's important that it's understood what is safe and what is not safe in these situations, because basically what this boils down to is, if this goes to court at some point in the future, if Twitch were to have to go into court and defend the way that they are handling the DMCA takedown notices, they would have to be able to say and prove that what they did was reasonable and what they did was appropriate circumstances, what it was governing appropriate circumstances. And it would be up to whoever happens to be in the room at the time to determine what those terms actually mean there. Most likely up to a jury, at which point it just comes down to what does that group of people believe, which means it comes down to what do the lawyers manage to posture and everything, and it's just a mess. So they would like to avoid that situation entirely. That said, I think that instant permaban after 3 strikes with the context of what Twitch is probably a little bit too far on the side of being overcautious. I think they could probably relax that a little bit. Personally, I would like to see it maybe be an instant manual review of what they're doing. And if they can then look and say, okay, yeah, this person they just occasionally played some music in the background. That's dumb. Let's stop that. That's one thing. Or if it's okay, this person is literally just streaming B movie over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, yeah, this should be closed down. We'll get rid of this. I think there's possibly some element of manual review in there. I do want to note that there have been some concerns that have come up in various cases around whether or not having an agent of something look at a thing then means that it's invalid for the safe harbor laws. So it's probably a bit more complicated than I'm stating there. The gist of what I'm trying to get across is I think their 3-strike rule could use some work. And I don't think they have a legal requirement to specifically at 3 strikes automatically ban somebody from Twitch. I think there's some wiggle room there that they could work on. One thing that's become very clear that Twitch needs to do is just better moderation tools for clips. Like the fact that their response to a lot of this has been, you should probably delete all your clips. And it's next to impossible to just delete all your clips. People are running like random shell scripts and stuff to delete all of their clips off of Twitch. I think it's become very clear that there needs to be better tools for that sort of thing on Twitch for creators. And I would like to see them implement some of that. And then the last thing that I think Twitch can do, and this isn't a solve, this is just something I would like to see them do, is provide better resources and better education on what you should do to file a counter notice. In the event that your channel is taken down, you are issued a DMCA takedown and you go, no, that was fair use. No, there was no reason that should have been taken down. And you respond to that and say, I want to take a counter notice. There needs to be things and resources that are put into place that explain to the person, okay, was this actually fair use? Do you even understand what fair use means? Because spoilers, most people don't. I don't even understand what fair use means. Do you understand what the repercussions of this could be if you issue this counter notice? Again, that's not a solve for the counter notice problem at all. That doesn't fix the fact that counter notices are way more of a pain in the ass than actually issuing the takedown notice in the first place is. But it is something that I think Twitch could do to help. The biggest thing that we need, though, has nothing to do with Twitch at all, and has to do with the DMCA itself and copyright law. The biggest thing we need is reform for the DMCA and reform for the copyright laws. Again, this all comes back to the days when the biggest thing people were concerned about was uploading pirated software. We're not dealing with pirated software anymore. We need additional reform for the DMCA that establishes some baselines for things like online streaming, online broadcasting, YouTube content creation, and so on and so forth. There is very little language that actually directly references any of that. It mostly comes down to case law that has come up afterwards. And what we need is an actual set of rules and guidelines and boundaries for what rights holders can do and what can protect the streamers and content creators in this time period. I don't know exactly what that fix could be. Like the one that immediately comes to mind is maybe there needs to be a period of time in which somebody can file a counterclaim and say, no, that this is maybe it all just comes down to the counterclaim. I'm not sure. But we need to get rid of this guilty until proven innocent system, because say you get a DMCA takedown immediately before your subathon as a streamer. This is now maybe a third of your monthly income that's gone out the window because of a DMCA takedown for something you did 15 years ago. Well, not 15 years, 2 years ago. Another thing I think on that note that would be good is a statute of limitations on this stuff. Like if it's been up on this site for 3 years, maybe there's a point where you have to say, okay, this is not relevant any longer. Maybe that could work. Maybe that couldn't. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not the lawyer here, but I think it's clear that there is a problem with modern Twitch users in today having their channels taken down because of a stream that they did 3 years ago. I think that's a problem. I really think the biggest thing that the DMCA needs is a proper system for counter notice. There needs to be an actual process that a content creator or streamer, someone who has had a takedown notice issued against them, can go through to be able to say, no, this is an incorrectly issued DMCA takedown. What I did here was fine, and that's that. And the biggest thing, honestly, and this is a huge ask, this is a minefield, we need to figure out how to fix copyright law. We need to figure out how to get to a point where there's some sort of wiggle room between literally everyone can use my copyright for whatever they feel like. It doesn't matter. It's almost like I don't even own this IP in the first place. And we're taking out people's livelihoods because they dared to listen to 30 seconds of a song while they were playing something else. There's so much problem with the way that copyright law currently exists that it needs to be fixed. And that's a big ask. That's going to take, I don't expect that to be fully fixed in my lifetime. It's just something that we as a country, and as a result, the world, because one thing I should mention is the fact that the Digital Millennium Copyright Act instituted by the US government and copyright law instituted by the US government applies to everyone is because Twitch is a country or a company that's based in the country of the United States. That means they have to adhere to these laws. The DMCA works against a German streamer as well as it does against an English streamer, as well as it does against a US streamer, just because the fact is Twitch is the one that has to abide by it, not those individual streamers. So that's a lot of my thoughts on that whole thing. The biggest reason that I wanted to make this video was just because I've been seeing a lot of misinformation floating around. I've been seeing a lot of people saying, I can't believe that Twitch would crack down on this like this. Twitch isn't doing anything. It's actually the Recording Industry Artists, or Recording, RIAA. I don't remember what it stands for. Recording Industry Association of America or something like that. It's that group that has just decided to start using this DMCA that has existed, again, since 1998 against Twitch streamers. And that's where the problem comes in. I do believe that Twitch has some things that they can change about the way that they adhere to these policies that could make things better for streamers. But the ultimate problem and the ultimate core of this whole thing is that we have this awful system in place that makes people guilty until proven innocent. And that is what has to go. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'll see you later.